The sun beat down without mercy that afternoon, the kind of heat that split the ground and made the air taste like ash. Eliza Monroe staggered along the rocky path, her boots worn thin, her lips cracked from thirst, her rounded belly heavy against her frame as she fought for breath. Heat wavered over the scrub oaks, and the trail buzzed with locusts, as if the desert itself refused to quiet. Behind her, a wagon faded into the distance, carrying away the man she'd once called her own. Her name whispered faintly on the breeze. No one replied. Her husband had taken their savings, their bags, even the canteen. He'd left her there like a forgotten weight. Near an old relay station, a water tank stood empty, its lid warped, the wood cracked like a vow left too long in the sun. 6 months pregnant, alone, and miles from the nearest settlement, she gripped her stomach. "Please," she murmured to the void. Her voice broke, a mix of dust and desperation. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The world tilted around her, shimmering in the heat. A buzzard wheeled overhead. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled. Eliza's legs gave way, and she collapsed to the ground. Thud. Pain shot through her. Her knees scraped open on the rough stones. Blood mingled with dirt. She pressed her hand to the earth for balance, feeling the grit bite back, and thought of Philadelphia's shutters, always closed in summer. Tears blended with sweat. I can't hold it together anymore. The pain, the hunger, the fear, it all surged at once, and words tore free before she could stop them. They spilled from her lips, shaking, raw. She lifted her skirt just enough, showing the bruises that marked her legs, scars of a journey too long and a betrayal too bitter. She wasn't trying to be improper, she was trying to be seen. Her breaths grew shallow. The faint sound of hooves echoed briefly. She thought it was a mirage. Then a shadow crossed her face. A weathered sign pointed west, to Iron Hollow, 8 miles of heat and hardship away. A man slid down from his horse. His boots were coated in dust, his voice low but careful. "Ma'am, you hurt?" Eliza squinted into the sun, barely able to focus. The figure before her was tall, broad-shouldered, his face carved by years of wind and toil. He smelled of leather and soil. She tried to speak, but her throat was parched. Her lips shaped the words anyway. "He left me. Please, I've got nowhere to go." The man knelt, removing his hat. His eyes softened when he saw the blood on her knees and the swell of her belly. He didn't know her name, but something in his chest tightened at the sight. "Let's get you out of this heat," he said, his voice steady, kind. He offered a calloused fromage, one that knew hard labor, but never cruelty. Eliza hesitated. The world blurred again. She didn't know if this was salvation or another kind of risk. Her voice cracked as she asked the only question her trembling heart could muster. "Why would a stranger stop for me?" Jacob Holt studied her for a moment before speaking. "Can you stand?" His voice was calm, like a quiet stream after a tempest. Eliza nodded faintly, but when she tried to rise, her legs buckled. Jacob caught her just in time. Her body shook against him. She smelled of dust, fear, and something faintly sweet, like jasmine bruised by the sun. He lifted her onto his horse with a gentleness that belied his rough hands. "Easy now," he said softly. "You're safe." She didn't respond. Her head rested against his shoulder as the horse began to move. The ride to the homestead took nearly an hour. The sky burned white, the air thick with heat. Jacob kept glancing at her, worried she'd faint before they reached shelter. But Eliza stayed awake, staring at the endless plain as if it might swallow her whole. The Double T Ranch sat low against a ridge, its white paint faded to gray, ports boards softened by years of dust and rain. As they rode up, 2 children stood in the doorway, not moving, just watching, like sentinels who'd seen too much for their years. Liam, 10, tall and solemn, stiffened when he saw the stranger. Clara, 4, clung to her father's leg, her eyes wide with wonder. "Pa, who's that lady?" Liam asked, not stepping closer. His hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles pale, as if September might sweep the stranger inside for good. Someone who needs help, Jacob replied. He carried Eliza inside, setting her gently on a sofa by the window. The room smelled of coffee and leather oil. Get her some water, he told Liam, and a piece of cornbread. When Eliza drank, her hand trembled so much that water dribbled down her chin. Jacob handed her a cloth without a word. She looked up at him, truly seeing him for the first time. His face was tanned, his eyes the color of a storm-faded sky. There was kindness there, but also something wounded, something familiar. I owe you my life, she said quietly. You don't owe me anything, he replied. Just rest. Clara clutched a rag doll to her chest and peeked from behind Jacob's leg. Her voice was a whisper, trying to be brave. You got a baby in there? She asked, pointing at Eliza's belly. The innocence made Eliza smile for the first time in days. Yes, little one, a tiny soul. Then Clara's lip quivered. My mama used to hum to me at dinner. You don't know our tune. Eliza kept her voice soft. Maybe you can teach me the first note. I'll try. Jacob turned away, busying himself with the stove. The room held traces of a woman's touch, a woven blanket with a frayed corner, a tin of buttons sorted by size, a faded ribbon tucked into chipped mug. But inside, something stirred. The woman he'd found on that dusty trail wasn't just lost. She was carrying a life, and maybe, just maybe, a piece of his redemption too. Outside, the wind shifted. The sky darkened, hinting at a storm. Jacob glanced out the window, a strange feeling rising in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but the woman he'd saved would soon turn his world upside down, and before long, she'd ask something of him that would test every principle he ever held. Days turned to weeks under the pale glow of summer. At dawn, Eliza lit the stove, the dry wood crackling like straw. She swept dust into tidy piles, pausing to catch her breath when the baby kicked. In the field, Jacob taught her how to read a horse's ears, forward for curious, pinned back for trouble. She laughed once, a soft sound, when the old gelding chose her over him. In the evenings, they mended the east fence. She held nails. He held silence. Slowly, the silence grew warm. Liam kept his distance, watching how she set the table differently than his mother had. Clara came and went, shyly. Some nights she handed Eliza a brush and sat on the step. Some nights she cried into her doll until sleep took her. Eliza never pressed. She waited. And waiting began to weave its magic. One night on the porch, with crickets singing like a choir, Eliza spoke the truth she'd kept buried. Samuel loved grand promises and little kindnesses. He sold my violin for a scheme and a map. The day he left, he took the last of our water. Jacob didn't interrupt. He handed her a clean handkerchief and stared into the dark, as if the desert could carry her pain away. Eliza's voice trembled as she continued. The first time he struck me, it wasn't anger, it was habit. He said I was too proud for a wife. The last time, he didn't bother hiding it. He left a scar no one can see. When he swore I'd pay for leaving, I believed him. Men like Samuel don't forget. They keep score. Jacob's hand tightened on the porch rail. He didn't speak, but his eyes burned steady in the dim light. Eliza looked up, meeting his gaze. They seem like good kids. They are. But they need love, a mother's touch. And you need a home, a name to shield you and that child. Her heart stuttered. What are you saying? Jacob took a deep breath. I've been thinking on this. Maybe there's a way we both rest easier. A practical arrangement. Not love. Not yet. Just survival. The fire snapped. Neither spoke. Then Eliza whispered, You don't even know me. He knows enough, he said. You're someone who's been hurt and still standing. That's more than most. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden. She had no money, no kin, nowhere to turn. The idea felt wild, almost improper, but what choice was there? Finally, she nodded. "All right, Mr. Holt, I'll take your offer." "Then you'd best call me Jacob," he said gently. Outside, the rain slowed. Inside, something took root. Not love yet, but hope. Fragile, real. As the firelight flickered across their faces, Jacob saw not a burden, but a beginning. Eliza saw not a stranger, but safety. Neither knew it then, but this desperate deal would change their lives forever. Weeks passed. The desert bloomed golden under summer's light. Each morning the stove sparked to life, smoke curling along the beams. Life at Double T found its rhythm. Eliza cooked, taught the children, even learned to milk the ornery cow that tolerated only her. Jacob worked the ranch from dawn to dusk, but every night he sat for supper with his new family. The kids laughed again. Clara spun circles around the table, and Liam began to smile more than he frowned. It felt calm. Too calm, perhaps. The kind of quiet that precedes a storm. Trouble arrived on a Thursday. A stranger rode slowly past the gate at dusk, hat tilted low, face shadowed. He asked Liam if the woman from the east still liked her tea. Liam shut the door without a word. That night, Eliza barely touched her food. Her hand shook as she folded the dishcloth. 2 days later, Jacob returned from Iron Hollow with dust on his boots and a note in his pocket. He said little, just placed the paper on the table. Unthinkable toy. The words were scrawled, hurried. Eliza felt the room spin. "He knows I'm here," she said. Jacob's jaw tightened. He'd gone to the sheriff, who only shrugged. "A father can stake a claim," he'd said. The fire in Eliza flared. "He abandoned me. He doesn't deserve to call himself a father." "I know," he said softly, "but the law might see it differently. A judge here will ask about a name, a home, and the man who stands by you when the baby cries." The words hung heavy. Eliza searched his face for answers. "What can I do?" Weeks passed, taut as a rope. They worked. They watched. When the moon was slim and coyotes yipped by the stream, Jacob spoke what he'd been holding. "If you were married, no one could take that child from you. Not legally, not ever." Eliza's breath caught. "Married? To who?" He met her eyes. "To me." The world seemed to tilt. "Jacob, you can't mean that."
"It wouldn't change anything," he said quickly. "Just a way to protect you and the child. A legal vow, nothing more." Eliza stared at her hands. Liam still placed his plate down gently, as if sound might break something. Clara let Eliza braid her hair, then cried because the braid didn't smell like her mother's soap. The idea was practical, but far from simple. She wasn't sure what scared her more, losing her child or trusting her heart again. Finally, she whispered, "If I say yes, will you regret it later?" Jacob shook his head. "No, ma'am. The only thing I'd regret is not helping when I could." Outside, thunder growled in the distance. Inside, Eliza's world was about to shift again. Because some promises start as shelter and grow into something braver. And Samuel was already riding with the storm at his back. How do you outrun a man who lives to claim what he never valued? The cottonwoods by the stream turned the color of bronze, and nights grew cool. By early autumn, under a sky so vast it humbled you, they stood before the justice of the peace in Iron Hollow. Jacob wore his best shirt, clean but frayed at the cuffs. Eliza held a small bouquet of desert blooms, her belly round beneath her dress. No music, no crowd, no grand vows. Just two souls, both once shattered, promising to guard the fragile good they'd found. When the words were said, Jacob turned to her and said softly, "You're safe now, Eliza. No one can take that from you." Something in her eased. For the first time in months, she felt peace, not the kind from comfort, but the kind from being seen and chosen. Back at the ranch, the children greeted her with laughter. Clara wrapped her small arms around Eliza's legs and said, "Are you my new mama now?" Eliza knelt and smiled through tears. "I suppose I am, sweetheart." That night, after the children slept, Jacob stood on the porch watching the stars gleam over the desert. Eliza joined him, her hand brushing his. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "Maybe not, but I wanted to. Sometimes doing what's right isn't about what's owed, it's about what feels true." They stood there silent, two people who'd lost everything and somehow found a second chance in each other. And maybe that's the lesson buried in all this dust and heartache. Sometimes life doesn't give what you planned. It gives what you need, even if it takes pain to find it. Maybe your heart's been broken too. Maybe you've stood where Eliza once did, lost and afraid, wondering if you'd ever feel whole again. But what if right now your next chapter is waiting just beyond the horizon? Would you see it? Would you be brave enough to say yes? If this story moved you, even a little, take a moment to like this post. It helps others find these tales of hope and second chances. And if you haven't yet, consider following for more stories. There are more stories from the wild frontier coming, more hearts to mend, more paths to walk together. Now, before you go, take a sip of your coffee, breathe deep, and tell me something. What time is it where you are, and where are you reading from? Because sometimes, friend, the best stories find us exactly when we need them most.